During a Sunday family dinner at the lakeside home I built with my own hands, my son looked me in the eyes and said, "Dad, this house is too big for you now. My in-laws need the master bedroom, so either you move to the guest room or find somewhere else to live." I didn't argue. I quietly packed 2 suitcases and left. They thought they had won. But 3 days later, when my attorney arrived with a sealed file my late wife left behind, their smiles disappeared. This story begins quietly, but I promise it won't leave you unchanged. Before we continue, drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to make a difficult decision about family? Your perspective might help someone else reading. Just a quick note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling. What truly matters is the lesson at the heart of this. Brandon set his fork down with deliberate precision, looked across the dining table at me and said the words that would shatter everything. "Dad, we've been thinking. The master bedroom is too big for just one person. Roxanne's parents are moving in. We'd like you to take the smaller room or find somewhere else to stay." That morning, before it all fell apart, I didn't know what was coming. I'm Vernon Sutton, 71 years old, a retired civil engineer who spent 35 years building highways and bridges across Oregon. But my greatest work was the lakeside home I built with my own hands in 1998. That January morning, I sat on the porch watching mist rise over Oswego Lake, the same view I'd watched for 26 years. My wife Margaret, who passed away 3 years ago at 68, used to sit beside me in this exact chair every morning, her hand resting on mine as we watched the sun climb over the lake. The wood beneath my palm was smooth and warm despite the winter cold, worn by decades of shared coffee. I built this house brick by brick, poured the foundation myself, framed every wall. Margaret handed me tools and made jokes about my obsessive measuring. The master bedroom faced east so she could wake to sunlight on the water. Brandon was coming for dinner that night. He'd called 3 days earlier saying he and Roxanne wanted to visit, bring her parents along. I'd said yes. I always said yes to my son. But sitting there on the porch, steam rising from my coffee mug, I felt something I couldn't name. A weight in my chest. The mist over the water looked thicker than usual. I told myself I was being foolish. I didn't know it then, sitting on that porch, watching the mist. But in 6 hours, my son would try to take everything Margaret and I had built. I spent the afternoon cooking. Pot roast the way Margaret used to make it. Roasted vegetables, fresh bread. I set the dining table with the good plates. 6 settings, cloth napkins. Brandon arrived at 5:30 with Roxanne and her parents. My son, 44 years old, a real estate agent who'd been struggling for years, hugged me at the door, but the embrace felt hollow. Something was different in his eyes. Something colder than disappointment, sharper than need. Roxanne, my 41-year-old daughter-in-law, a high-end event manager with impeccable taste and ice-cold pragmatism, kissed my cheek without warmth. Her perfume was expensive and aggressive, cutting through the smell of roasted meat. Gordon Whitfield, Roxanne's 68-year-old father, a retired factory foreman with calloused hands, shook my hand firmly, but wouldn't meet my eyes. Irene Whitfield, Roxanne's 66-year-old mother, a retired dental hygienist with nervous hands, smiled too brightly and complimented the table setting 3 times. We sat. We ate. I asked about Brandon's work. Short answers. I asked about Roxanne's latest event. She described a corporate gala with the enthusiasm of someone reading a phone book. Gordon and Irene said almost nothing. Then Brandon set his fork down. That deliberate precision, the way he looked at me, and the words. Tequila. The master bedroom is too big for just one person. Roxanne's parents are moving in. We'd like you to take the smaller room or find somewhere else to stay. The room went silent, except for the faint tick of the clock Margaret had hung in 1999. I stared at my son across the table, the same table where I'd helped him with homework. where Margaret had served his birthday cakes, where we'd celebrated his wedding to Roxanne 8 years earlier. How does a father respond when his own son, the child he carried from the hospital 44 years ago, looks him in the eye and tells him to leave his own home? Roxanne continued eating, not meeting my gaze. Gordon stared at his water glass. Irene's hands trembled as she reached for her napkin. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not dramatic, not violent, just a quiet fracture like ice on the lake when spring comes too early. "This is my house," I said. Not angry, just factual. "I built it. Margaret and I—" "Dad." Brandon's voice was firm. "You're 71. You don't need all this space. Roxanne and I have been covering your expenses for months. Property taxes alone are— I never asked you to pay anything. We're family. We help each other." He leaned forward. "But this house is too much for one person. It makes sense for Gordon and Irene to have the master suite. You can take the guest room, or we can help you find a nice apartment." I looked at Roxanne. She was nodding slightly, still not meeting my eyes. I looked at Gordon and Irene. Gordon's jaw was tight. Irene was blinking rapidly. They'd planned this. All of them. Rehearsed it. Decided that Sunday dinner was the best time to tell a 71-year-old widower he was no longer welcome in the home he'd built with his own hands, for the wife he'd loved for 47 years. I could have fought, could have shouted, could have thrown them out. Instead, I set down my silverware with the same deliberate precision Brandon had used. I looked at my son. I thought about the legal papers I'd signed 10 years ago in Eleanor Blackwell's law office, the careful provisions Margaret and I had discussed, the protections we'd put in place. I thought about the box Margaret had left me tucked in the back of my closet, with a note in her handwriting, "Only when you truly need to." "All right," I said. My voice was calm, steady. "If that's what you want." Brandon blinked. He'd expected argument tears, pleading. Roxanne's fork paused mid-air. Gordon exhaled with relief. Irene's shoulders dropped. "I'll pack some things tonight," I continued. "Be out by tomorrow." Brandon nodded slowly, almost smiled. "This is for the best, Dad. You'll see." I stood, picked up my plate, walked to the kitchen. They thought they'd won, thought I was defeated. An old man too tired to fight, too broken by grief to resist. What none of them knew was that 10 years ago, when I sat in Eleanor Blackwell's law office signing papers I'd prepared for exactly this moment, Margaret had known. She'd seen something in Brandon even then, something I'd refused to believe. She'd been right, she always was. I loaded my plate into the dishwasher and listened to them resume eating in the dining room. Roxanne's small laugh, Brandon's satisfied tone explaining logistics to Gordon. They thought they were forcing me out. They didn't know what I'd prepared 10 years ago. I packed 2 suitcases in 20 minutes while they finished dessert. Brandon stood in the hallway watching me fold shirts, his arms crossed. He didn't offer to help carry them down. The rain drummed against the motel window as I sat on the edge of a bed that wasn't mine, in a room that smelled of strangers, staring at those 2 suitcases containing 44 years of being a father. Lakeview Motel in Teagard. $68 a night. Clean enough. Quiet enough. The first night I'd slept anywhere but my lakeside home in 27 years. I'd grabbed practical things: clothes, toiletries, my laptop, documents from the filing cabinet. But I'd left behind the photo albums stacked in the study, Margaret's reading glasses still on her nightstand, the coffee mug she'd used every morning, the one I couldn't bring myself to put away. Those things felt too heavy to carry in the moment. Margaret died in that bedroom 3 years ago. Hospice nurse holding one hand, me holding the other. She'd looked at me and smiled and said, "You'll be all right. You're stronger than you think." I was the one who just walked out. The motel room had beige walls, and a landscape painting bolted to the wall above the bed. Generic mountains, generic lake. Nothing like the real lake I'd watched every morning through windows I'd installed myself. The mattress was too soft. The pillows smelled like industrial detergent. I sat there listening to rain and traffic and thought about Brandon watching me pack. My son, 44 years old. I'd carried him from the hospital the day he was born, taught him to ride a bike on the driveway of our old house before we built the new one, paid for his college, stood beside him at his wedding. He hadn't said goodbye when I left, just nodded. Roxanne had smiled small and satisfied. Gordon and Irene had already moved their luggage into the master bedroom. How do you measure what you lose when you leave a house? Square footage market value, or the weight of 27 years of morning coffee on a porch you built with your own hands. I pulled out my phone, stared at the screen. Then I typed a message to Eleanor Blackwell, the attorney who'd helped Margaret and me with estate planning 10 years ago. Eleanor, it's time. I need to meet you tomorrow morning. Sent. Eleanor was 65 now, sharp as ever, a trust and estate attorney who'd practiced law in Portland for 40 years. She'd know exactly what I meant. I set the phone down on the nightstand, stared at the ceiling. The rain kept drumming. Then the phone buzzed. Not Eleanor, a number I had saved but rarely used. Hazel Greer, my 74-year-old neighbor who'd lived next door since we built the house in 1998, texted me that first night with words that cut through the fog. Vernon, I saw what happened today. I've been keeping notes. Call me when you're ready. I stared at the message. Hazel, Margaret's friend, they'd shared coffee on our porch every Tuesday morning for years. After Margaret died, Hazel still came by, still sat in Margaret's chair, still drank coffee with me even though neither of us said much. She'd been watching. I typed back, "Thank you, I'll call soon." Another buzz. Eleanor, this time, 8 a.m. tomorrow. My office, bring everything. I set the phone down again. Felt something shift in my chest. Not the crack from earlier at dinner. Something else. Something steadier. I wasn't alone. Eleanor knew the plan. Hazel had been keeping notes. Margaret. Margaret! I stood up, grabbed my keys, walked out into the rain. The motel parking lot was half-empty puddles reflecting yellow streetlights. My truck sat 3 spaces from my door. I unlocked it, reached under the driver's seat, and pulled out a small wooden box. Margaret had made me promise to keep it locked in the truck. Not in the house. Not in a safe deposit box. In the truck. Only open it when you truly need to, she'd said. That was 2 months before she died. Her voice already weak from the cancer. You'll know when? I'd asked what was inside. She'd just shaken her head and made me promise. I carried the box back to the motel room, water dripping from my jacket. Set it on the desk beside the television. The wood was old, smooth, about the size of a shoebox. A small brass lock on the front. The key was on my keychain. Had been for 3 years. I'd never used it. Margaret had been gone for 3 years. But sitting in that motel room, holding her handwriting on the box lid, I felt her presence stronger than I had since the day I buried her. I unlocked the box. Inside a USB drive, a sealed white envelope, and a handwritten note on Margaret's stationery, the kind with small flowers in the corner, that she'd ordered from a catalog. I picked up the note. Her handwriting was shaky, written near the end when holding a pen took effort. Vernon, if you're reading this, it means what I feared has begun. Start with the USB. Everything you need is there. The envelope is for later when you're ready. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. You would have tried to fix it, and some things can't be fixed, only prepared for. You're stronger than you think. Always, Margaret. My hands were shaking. She knew. Margaret knew this was coming. How long did she know? Months, years. I picked up the USB drive. It was small black with a label in Margaret's handwriting for Vernon the Truth. I turned it over in my palm, felt the weight of it. Lighter than a house key, but somehow heavier than anything I'd ever held. My wife had been dead for 3 years, but she'd known exactly what Brandon would do. Known exactly when I would need this. Known I'd be sitting in a motel room displaced and grieving, desperate for answers. I didn't plug it into my laptop. Not yet. It was late, I was exhausted. And I knew that whatever was on this drive would change everything I thought I knew about the last 3 years. I set the USB drive on the nightstand, stared at it. 7 files Margaret had told Hazel once. I remembered now. Margaret had mentioned it in passing, thought I hadn't heard. 7 files on that USB drive. 7 pieces of truth my wife had compiled before she died. Tomorrow morning I would open file 1. But tonight I just sat in that motel room holding Margaret's note, reading it again and again. What I feared has begun. She'd known. And she'd prepared. I packed 2 suitcases in 20 minutes while they finished dessert. Brandon stood in the hallway watching me fold shirts, his arms crossed. He didn't offer to help carry them down. The rain drummed against the motel window as I sat on the edge of a bed that wasn't mine, in a room that smelled of strangers, staring at those 2 suitcases containing 44 years of being a father. Lakeview Motel in Teagard. $68 a night. Clean enough. Quiet enough. The first night I'd slept anywhere but my lakeside home in 27 years. I'd grabbed practical things. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, documents from the filing cabinet. But I'd left behind the photo albums stacked in the study. Margaret's reading glasses still on her nightstand. The coffee mug she'd used every morning, the one I couldn't bring myself to put away. Those things felt too heavy to carry in the moment. Margaret died in that bedroom 3 years ago. Hospice nurse holding one hand, me holding the other. She'd looked at me and smiled and said, "You'll be all right. You're stronger than you think." I was the one who just walked out. The motel room had beige walls and a landscape painting bolted to the wall above the bed. Generic mountains. Generic lake. Nothing like the real lake I'd watched every morning through windows I'd installed myself. The mattress was too soft. The pillows smelled like industrial detergent. I sat there listening to rain and traffic and thought about Brandon watching me pack. My son, 44 years old. I'd carried him from the hospital the day he was born. Taught him to ride a bike on the driveway of our old house before we built the new one. Paid for his college. Stood beside him at his wedding. He hadn't said goodbye when I left. Just nodded. Roxanne had smiled small and satisfied. Gordon and Irene had already moved their luggage into the master bedroom. How do you measure what you lose when you leave a house? Square footage, market value, or the weight of 27 years of morning coffee on a porch you built with your own hands? I pulled out my phone, stared at the screen. Then I typed a message to Eleanor Blackwell, the attorney who'd helped Margaret and me with estate planning 10 years ago. "Eleanor, it's time. I need to meet you tomorrow morning." Sent. Eleanor was 65 now, sharp as ever, a trust and estate attorney who'd practiced law in Portland for 40 years. She'd know exactly what I meant. I set the phone down on the nightstand, stared at the ceiling. The rain kept drumming. Then the phone buzzed. Not Eleanor. A number I had saved but rarely used. Hazel Greer, my 74-year-old neighbor, who'd lived next door since we built the house in 1998, texted me that first night with words that cut through the fog. "Vernon, I saw what happened today. I've been keeping notes. Call me when you're ready." I stared at the message. Hazel, Margaret's friend. They'd shared coffee on our porch every Tuesday morning for years. After Margaret died, Hazel still came by. Still sat in Margaret's chair. Still drank coffee with me even though neither of us said much. She'd been watching. I typed back, "Thank you, I'll call soon." Another buzz. Eleanor this time. 8 a.m. tomorrow. My office, bring everything. I set the phone down again. Felt something shift in my chest. Not the crack from earlier at dinner. Something else. Something steadier. I wasn't alone. Eleanor knew the plan. Hazel had been keeping notes. Margaret. I stood up, grabbed my keys, walked out into the rain. The motel parking lot was half-empty puddles reflecting yellow streetlights. My truck sat 3 spaces from my door. I unlocked it, reached under the driver's seat, and pulled out a small wooden box. Margaret had made me promise to keep it locked in the truck. Not in the house. Not in a safe deposit box. In the truck. Only open it when you truly need to, she'd said. That was 2 months before she died. Her voice already weak from the cancer. You'll know when. I'd asked what was inside. She'd just shaken her head and made me promise. I carried the box back to the motel room, water dripping from my jacket. Set it on the desk beside their television. The wood was old, smooth, about the size of a shoebox. A small brass lock on the front. The key was on my keychain. Had been for 3 years. I'd never used it. Margaret had been gone for 3 years. But sitting in that motel room, holding her handwriting on the box lid, I felt her presence stronger than I had since the day I buried her. I unlocked the box. Inside a USB drive, a sealed white envelope, and a handwritten note on Margaret's stationery, the kind with small flowers in the corner that she'd ordered from a catalog. I picked up the note. Her handwriting was shaky, written near the end when holding a pen took effort. Vernon. If you're reading this, it means what I feared has begun. Start with the USB. Everything you need is there. The envelope is for later when you're ready. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. You would have tried to fix it, and some things can't be fixed, only prepared for. You're stronger than you think. Always, Margaret. My hands were shaking. She knew. Margaret knew this was coming. How long did she know? Months, years. I picked up the USB drive. It was small, black, with a label in Margaret's handwriting for Vernon, the truth. I turned it over in my palm. Felt the weight of it. Lighter than a house key, but somehow heavier than anything I'd ever held. My wife had been dead for 3 years, but she'd known exactly what Brandon would do. Known exactly when I would need this. Known I'd be sitting in a motel room displaced and grieving, desperate for answers. I didn't plug it into my laptop. Not yet. It was late. I was exhausted. And I knew that whatever was on this drive would change everything I thought I knew about the last 3 years. I set the USB drive on the nightstand, stared at it. 7 files, Margaret had told Hazel once. I remembered now. Margaret had mentioned it in passing, thought I hadn't heard. 7 files on that USB drive. 7 pieces of truth my wife had compiled before she died. Tomorrow morning, I would open file 1. But tonight, I just sat in that motel room, holding Margaret's note, reading it again and again. What I feared has begun. She'd known. And she'd prepared. I didn't sleep, just sat in that motel room, holding the USB drive until the sky started turning gray. At 6 in the morning, my hand shook slightly as I inserted it into my laptop. Clicked on file 1 labeled Brandon phone call Sept 2020 and heard my son's voice fill the room with words that would change everything. The house is worth at least $800,000. Once the old man's gone, it's ours. We just need to wait. Roxanne's already talking to a broker about staging it for sale. Another voice. Roxanne. Quieter but clear. What if he lives another 20 years? Brandon laughed. Not the laugh I remembered from his childhood. Something colder. He won't. And if he does, there are other ways. Dad's already 70. A little cognitive decline, some forgetfulness. It's not hard to make a case. The recording stopped. I stared at the screen. File timestamp September 2020, 3.5 years ago. Margaret was still alive then, weak from the cancer, but still here, still sitting on our porch every morning, still holding my hand. She'd heard this. Somehow she'd heard this and said nothing to me. She just quietly recorded it, labeled it, saved it for the moment I would need it. The file metadata showed it had been created from a phone backup. Margaret's phone. She must have been in the next room when Brandon made the call, her phone on the kitchen counter recording, without him knowing. I didn't know exactly how she'd done it. I only knew she had. I just knew my wife had heard our son plot against me and chosen to build my defense in silence rather than break my heart while she was dying. I played it again. Listened to Brandon's voice. Once the old man's gone, I was the old man. Margaret had been gone for 3 years. But in that motel room, hearing my son's voice plot against me on a recording she'd made in secret, I felt my wife's presence more powerfully than at any moment since I'd buried her. She knew what kind of man our son had become, and she loved me enough to prepare the evidence I would need when the truth finally broke. I didn't play the other 6 files. Not yet. I closed the laptop, showered, dressed, and drove to Eleanor Blackwell's office in downtown Portland. Eleanor Blackwell, my 65-year-old estate attorney with 3 decades of experience in family law, sat across her oak desk reviewing the stamped trust file we'd created together 10 years earlier. Her silver reading glasses perched on her nose as she studied every clause with the precision that had kept my family protected all these years. Her office smelled like old books and fresh coffee. The walls were lined with legal volumes. Through the window behind her, I could see the gray January sky hanging over the city. I'd brought Margaret's box, set it on the desk between us. Eleanor looked at it, then at me. "You opened it last night." And I handed her the USB drive. She plugged it into her computer. Opened file 1, listened to the entire recording without speaking. Her expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened on her pen. When it finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Margaret knew," she finally said. Not a question. She knew. Eleanor pulled the trust file from her cabinet. Thick document stamped and notarized. She flipped to the property schedule. "Vernon, they can't touch the house. Not without your signature. The trust is ironclad. You're the grantor and sole trustee. The lakeside home is listed here appraised at $850,000 when we established the trust in 2014. Brandon has no legal claim. None. He can't sell it. Can't force you out. Can't even step foot in it without your permission." "Then why did you make me set this up 10 years ago?" I asked. "You said I needed protection." Eleanor met my eyes. "Because family law is full of sons and daughters who think they're entitled to their parents' assets before those parents are dead. Because a trust gives you unilateral control, absolute authority. Brandon can't touch this property unless you're incapacitated or dead, and even then, the trust specifies exactly what happens." She tapped the document. "You hold all the power here. They don't know that yet, do they?" No. Eleanor's trust file was a fortress 10 years old, stamped, notarized, legally impenetrable. But even a fortress doesn't protect you from the wound of knowing your son wants you gone. "Before we trigger anything," Eleanor said slowly, "let me see what else is in there." She clicked through the USB directory. 7 files total. File 1 was the phone recording. Files 2 through 6 were labeled with dates and names. File 7 just said final, read last. Eleanor opened File 2, email screenshots. "Brandon to a real estate broker dated 8 months ago. Subject line, confidential property sale inquiry." The email body made my stomach turn. Brandon asking about procedures for selling property when the owner was experiencing cognitive decline and might resist the sale. Eleanor's jaw tightened. She opened File 3. More emails. "Brandon to someone named Dr. Hamilton. File 4 was a scanned document, a draft petition for conservatorship, half completed, dated 3 months ago. Eleanor stopped scrolling, looked at me. Quit Vernon. Her voice was very calm, very controlled. Your son isn't just trying to push you out of the master bedroom. He's building a legal case to declare you incompetent and seize control of the trust itself. My blood went cold. That's why Margaret recorded everything, Eleanor continued. She saw this coming, not just the eviction, the whole plan. Brandon was preparing to have you declared mentally unfit so he could take over as trustee and liquidate the property. Can he do that? Not easily. Not without medical evidence of actual incapacity. But she clicked open another file. If he can get a doctor to sign off, if he can show a pattern of concerning behavior, if he can convince a judge you're no longer capable of managing your affairs. She trailed off, looked at the screen. Her expression darkened. How far has he gotten? I asked. Far enough that we need to move now. Eleanor closed the laptop, looked at me with the calm precision of a surgeon about to deliver bad news. I think your son is preparing something much more dangerous than kicking you out of the master bedroom. And if Margaret compiled all this evidence, she knew it was coming. I thought about the sealed white envelope still in the box. The one Margaret's note said was, "Later, when you're ready." What do we do? I asked. Eleanor's expression hardened. We fight. And we use every piece of evidence your wife left you. Eleanor clicked open file 3 on Margaret's USB, and I watched my son's words materialize on the screen in black Arial font. Property owner experiencing cognitive decline looking to list within 6 months. Need discreet broker familiar with elder incompetence sales. The email was dated 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks before the Sunday dinner. Before Brandon demanded I leave the master bedroom. He planned this, Eleanor said quietly. The dinner wasn't spontaneous. It was part of a timeline. She scrolled through more files. Emailed to a neuropsychiatrist's office requesting consultation about elderly family member with concerning memory issues. Real estate valuations for lakeside properties. Contact information for 3 different guardianship attorneys. Then Eleanor stopped. Opened a scanned document I recognized immediately. Vernon, do you remember signing this? Medical power of attorney. My signature at the bottom. Brandon had brought it to me last week. Said it was for accident preparedness, just in case something happened, and I couldn't make medical decisions. Standard stuff, he'd said. I'd signed it without reading every line. I trusted my own son. Eleanor pulled out a magnifying glass from her desk drawer, examined the document under the light. Her expression darkened. Haditsa. This clause about asset management, she said slowly. It wasn't in the original. She pulled up a template POA form on her computer. Compared them side by side. See this? The spacing is different. The font size shifted by half a point. Someone added this clause after you signed. That's not contract fraud, Vernon. That's felony forgery under Oregon Revised Statutes 165. My hands went cold. Are you certain? I've testified in forgery cases. This is textbook alteration. He had you sign a medical authorization, then inserted language giving him control over your financial assets if he could get a doctor to declare you incompetent. How many ways can a son betray his father? I was learning the answer 1 USB file at a time, and Margaret had documented every single one before she died. What do we do with this? I asked. Eleanor's smile was thin and sharp. We keep it. And when the time comes, we show a judge exactly what your son has been building. The next afternoon, I met Hazel at Riverside Cafe in downtown Portland. Small place booths with cracked vinyl, the smell of coffee and toast. Hazel was already there when I arrived, a small notebook on the table in front of her. She looked older than I remembered. Or maybe I just hadn't really looked at her since Margaret died. 74 gray hair pulled back wearing the same blue cardigan she'd worn to Margaret's funeral. "I've been logging everything since August," she said, without preamble. Pushed the notebook toward me. "License plates, names on jackets, conversations I heard when Brandon was on your porch talking too loud." I opened it. Page after page of dated entries in Hazel's neat handwriting. August 12th, black sedan Oregon plates stayed 2 hours. Man in suit carrying folder marked Estate Planning Associates. September 3rd, overheard Brandon on phone in driveway. He won't know until it's too late. October 18th, woman with clipboard taking photos of house. Real estate company logo on her jacket. Margaret asked me to do this," Hazel said quietly. "The week before she died, she took my hand and said, 'Hazel, if anything feels wrong about my boy, write it down.' She knew Vernon. She knew what he was planning." I stared at the notebook. 6 months of evidence. My neighbor watching my house documenting my son's conspiracy because my dying wife had asked her to. "There's more." Hazel pulled out her phone, scrolled to a photo. "This man came last Tuesday. His car had a law firm decal elder guardianship and conservatorship specialists. He was inside your house for over an hour." The photo showed a man in his 50s, gray suit carrying a thick legal folder. "Walking up my driveway, the house I built." "Thank you," I said. My voice sounded rough. "Margaret chose well when she chose you." Hazel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We're going to fight this. You're not alone." That night back at the motel, my phone rang. "Brandon." I stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. "Dad." His voice was soft, concerned. Nothing like the cold tone from Sunday dinner. "Where are you?" "Are you? I've been worried. We should work this out. You're still my father." I heard Roxanne's voice in the background, coaching him, whispering the words he should say. "And I thought my son doesn't even have the courage to manipulate me without a script. I'm staying somewhere safe," I said, voice neutral, calm. "I'll be in touch when I'm ready." "Dad, please. I know I know we could have handled it better. But we're family. Let me come get you. Bring you home. Home. The house I built with my own hands. The house he was planning to sell out from under me." "I appreciate the call, Brandon. I need some time." "Time for what? Dad, are you feeling okay?" Thinking clearly, there it was, the setup, the groundwork for the incompetence narrative. "I'm thinking very clearly," I said. "Clearer than I have in years." "Goodbye, Brandon." I ended the call, sat there in the motel room, staring at the phone. Rain drummed against the window, blurring the streetlights into halos of gold. The heating unit under the window rattled and hummed. For 44 years, I'd taught Brandon how to build, how to measure twice and cut once, how to lay a foundation that would support the weight of what came after, how to read blueprints and see the structure before it existed, how to plan every step methodically, systematically, with patience and precision. I'd been proud of how well he learned. What I'd never imagined was that he would use those exact lessons, that systematic, detail-oriented approach. I'd spent decades teaching him to construct the most methodical, well-planned trap I'd ever seen. He'd measured twice. He'd laid the foundation carefully. He'd planned every step. And the structure he was building was designed to bury me. I looked out at the Oregon rain, the parking lot, the blurred lights. What Brandon didn't know was that I also knew how to tear things down. The next morning, I started building. Not a house, a case. I signed my name on the 3-month lease agreement, the pen scratching across paper in the notary's quiet office, officially renting a house I had no intention of ever calling home. This was a war room, not a residence. The rental was in Southeast Portland. Small 2-bedroom bungalow with beige walls and carpet that smelled like industrial cleaner. Empty. Bare. Perfect. Eleanor helped me move in. We didn't bring furniture, just a folding table, 2 chairs, a locked filing cabinet, my laptop. This isn't a home, Vernon Utley, Eleanor said, setting the cabinet against the wall. It's headquarters. Keep it sparse. Don't get comfortable. You're only here to work. I nodded. Looked around the empty living room, single window facing the street. Overhead light with a pull chain. Nothing personal. Nothing permanent. Just a space to compile evidence against my son. Eleanor left around noon. I sat at the folding table, opened my laptop, and looked at Margaret's USB drive. File 5. I hadn't opened it yet. I clicked it. A scanned document filled the screen. Pages and pages of Margaret's handwriting. Small, precise, dated entries going back 5 years. March 2019. Brandon said he had job interview in Seattle, needed $300 for gas and hotel. I gave it to him. Vernon later found out there was no interview. Brandon used the money to pay off credit card debt he'd hidden from Roxanne. June 2020. Brandon took $500 from Vernon's wallet while visiting. Blamed the house cleaner. We don't have a house cleaner. Vernon didn't notice the money was missing until I pointed it out. November 2021, Brandon arranged roof repair on our house. Told Vernon it cost $8,000. I found the actual invoice in the mail. For $200. Brandon pocketed the difference. I scrolled down. Entry after entry. Lies. Thefts. Manipulations. Margaret had documented everything with dates, amounts, witnesses when available. 5 years of notes. 5 years of my wife watching our son become someone she didn't recognize. And I had seen nothing, chosen to see nothing, because seeing would have meant accepting a truth I wasn't ready to face. Margaret had been ready. She'd faced it. And she'd built an evidence trail while I remained willfully blind. The final entry was dated 2 months before she died. September 2021. Brandon asked Vernon to co-sign loan for business investment. Vernon considered it. I told him no. Brandon hasn't spoken to me since. I think he knows I see who he really is. I think that's why he's waiting for me to die. I sat back in the folding chair, stared at the ceiling. My wife had known that our son was waiting for her to die so he could manipulate me without her protection. And instead of confronting him, instead of breaking my heart while she fought cancer, she'd quietly documented everything I would need to protect myself after she was gone. I closed file 5, sat in the empty rental house as afternoon light faded to evening. Didn't turn on the overhead light, just sat in the growing darkness. Finally, I opened file 6, audio file. I clicked play. Margaret's voice filled the room. Weak, barely above a whisper. The voice from her final weeks when speaking took all her strength. Vernon. Long pause. Breathing. If you're listening to this, our son has made his choice. Another pause. I heard her swallow. Heard the effort it took. And don't judge him out of hatred. Judge him with the sadness of a father who loved what his boy could have been. Brandon isn't evil. He's afraid and incompetent and desperate. That's a dangerous combination. Rustling sound, like she was adjusting position in bed. I've left evidence with Eleanor. You'll find it when you need it. There's also a sealed envelope. Don't open it until everything is over. But know this. Her voice got quieter. I turned up the volume. The house was never just a house, Vernon. It was our promise. Every brick you laid thinking about us. Every window you installed framed a view we'd share. Every morning we sat on that porch together was another day we kept the promise we made when we were 24 years old. I heard her crying softly. Then her voice steadied. She'll protect it. Not because it's worth money. Protect it because it's the physical form of what we built together. Protect it. And you're protecting us. I'm still with you. I'll always be with you. The recording ended. I sat in the dark rental house for a long time. The house wasn't brick and cedar and lake views. It wasn't square footage or appraised value. It was every morning Margaret sat beside me on that porch. It was every board I laid thinking about our future. It was the physical form of a promise to build something together that would last. Brandon saw $850,000. I saw 27 years of mornings. 27 years of hands held across a breakfast table. 27 years of watching the sun rise over the lake through windows I'd installed myself, because I wanted Margaret to wake to that exact view. The house was the promise. The promise was everything. I played the recording again and again. Listened to my wife's dying voice tell me what I'd always known but never articulated. The house was never just a house. It was our promise. I repeated those words aloud in the darkness of the empty rental house. Heard my own voice echo off bare walls. The house was never just a house. It was our promise. And I knew I was not allowed to lose. Not because of money, not because of pride, because losing the house meant losing the last physical evidence that Margaret and I had existed together in the world. That we'd kept our promise. That we'd built something that lasted. Brandon could take a lot of things from me. My dignity, my trust, my illusions about fatherhood. But he couldn't take the promise. He couldn't have the house. I wouldn't let him. I sat there in the dark until midnight. Then I opened my laptop and started writing. Every memory, every detail, every piece of evidence Margaret had left me, every conversation with Eleanor, every observation from Hazel. I was building a case the same way I'd built the house. Brick by brick. Foundation first. Structure sound. Every piece measured and placed with precision. Brandon had learned from me. But he'd forgotten one thing. I taught him to build. I never taught him to build better than me. The promise wouldn't protect itself. I had to fight for it. Eleanor called Thursday morning. Her voice was controlled but urgent in a way that made my blood go cold. You need to come to my office immediately. Brandon filed a guardianship review petition with the county this morning, and it's worse than we thought. I drove downtown through rain, parked, took the elevator to Eleanor's floor. She was waiting at her desk with 2 documents spread out under a bright examination lamp. The first was the guardianship petition. Formal, legal language. Filed that morning with Multnomah County Circuit Court. Requesting judicial review of my mental capacity and appointment of temporary guardian to manage my assets pending full competency evaluation. The petitioner Brandon Sutton concerned son. The attached supporting evidence medical power of attorney signed by me 2 weeks ago. Look at this, Eleanor said. She adjusted the lamp, a forensic magnification light, the kind used in document authentication. Placed the power of attorney underneath. I leaned in. So now this is your signature, she said, pointing. See the ink consistent density, single session. But this clause. She moved her finger up the page. The asset management authorization. Look at the ink density here. I looked. Even to my untrained eye, I could see it. The text was slightly darker. The pressure different. Someone added it afterward. Eleanor continued. Different pen. Different session. See how the ink sits on the paper. This was written after your signature dried. I stared at my own signature under that forensic light, seeing the honest ink I'd laid down 2 weeks ago, and beside it the forged clause my son added later when I wasn't looking. It felt like watching someone dig up Margaret's grave. This isn't contract fraud, Vernon, Eleanor said quietly. This is forgery in the first degree under Oregon Revised Statutes 165.0013. Criminal, not civil. Your son is facing potential felony prosecution. I straightened up, looked at Eleanor. File the report, I said. Today, District Attorney's Office and DHS Elder Abuse Division. I want every agency that handles this kind of crime to know what my son did. Eleanor nodded. I've already drafted it, just needed your authorization. You have it. She made a note on her legal pad, then looked at me. Vernon, once I file this, there's no going back. Brandon will be investigated for felony forgery. If the DA prosecutes, he could face prison time. Are you certain? I thought about Margaret's voice on that USB recording. About the house we built together. About 27 years of promises kept. I'm certain, I said. File it. That night, sitting in the rental house, something occurred to me. I called Eleanor. The security camera, I said. I installed a standalone system in 2020. Local storage SD card recording, no internet connection. Brandon moved out before I installed it. He doesn't know it exists. Silence on the other end. Then, where is it? Living room, hidden in the bookshelf. Looks like a regular book spine, but it's a camera housing. Records motion-activated footage to an SD card behind the false cover. We need that card, Eleanor said. I called Hazel. She answered on the second ring. I need a favor, I said. You still have the spare key Margaret gave you. 20 years ago. Yes, it's on my keyring. Can you get into the house without Brandon seeing? I need you to retrieve something. Hazel didn't hesitate. Tell me where. We met the next afternoon at Riverside Cafe. Hazel handed me a small SD card in a plastic case. So no one saw me, she said. I waited until Brandon's car was gone. Took me 3 minutes. In and out. Eleanor was already there, laptop open. I handed her the card. She plugged it in. Scrolled through the file directory. Weeks of footage, motion-activated clips. She found the date Brandon had brought me the power of attorney. Clicked it. Grainy security footage filled the screen. My living room. Brandon standing by the window, phone to his ear. I could hear him clearly. The camera had audio. Yeah, we're moving forward, Brandon was saying. I got him to sign the POA this morning. He didn't even read it. Once we get him declared incompetent, the trust is dissolved and the house transfers to us. The lawyer said it takes about 60 days from filing to court approval. We just need to stay patient. Pause. Then, no, he has no idea. I think he's already showing signs. Forgetful. Confused. It won't be hard to make the case. Roxanne appeared in the frame. Stood behind Brandon. Nodded slowly while he talked. What does a father feel watching footage of his son, the boy he carried from the hospital 44 years ago, calmly plotting to have him declared mentally incompetent and stripped of everything he'd built? I watched the entire clip in silence. Then I asked Eleanor to play it again. Jack, once we get him declared incompetent, the trust is dissolved and the house transfers to us. I listened to my son's voice. Calm, methodical. Planning my legal destruction the way I'd taught him to plan construction projects. Step by step. Foundation to finish. Eleanor looked at me. This is everything we need. Audio-visual evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to forge documents, elder abuse. Vernon, this is... Play it again, I said. She did. I watched Brandon's face, heard his voice, saw Roxanne nod. Once we get him declared incompetent. 3 times I watched that footage. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I wanted to memorize every detail. The exact sound of Brandon's voice when he said those words. The casual way he discussed destroying his father. The smile on his face when he said he has no idea. I wanted to remember all of it, so that later, when this was over, and Brandon asked for forgiveness, if he asked for forgiveness, I would remember precisely what he'd been willing to do. I would remember the sound of my son's voice, plotting to take everything Margaret and I had built together. I would remember that he'd smiled. Eleanor saved the file, created backups, encrypted copies for court submission. Oh, we have him, she said quietly. Vernon, we have everything we need. The forged POA. The audio confession. Margaret's documentation. Hazel's observations. He can't win this. I nodded, stared at the frozen frame on the laptop screen. Brandon's face mid-sentence. Good, I said. Now let's find out why he's so desperate. Watching that footage taught me something. Brandon wasn't just betraying me, he was desperate. The question was why. Eleanor answered it Monday morning. She slid the private investigator's report across her desk, and I saw a number that made my stomach drop. Not the $180,000 in debt Brandon had mentioned last year, but $340,000 in bold red ink with a deadline circled in marker November 30th, 2024. The investigator tracked down all of it, Eleanor said. She opened the file, pointed to itemized entries. Personal loans from 3 different lenders. Credit cards maxed at $47,000. And this a private investor note for $125,000 due November 30th. If he doesn't pay, they file suit. I stared at the numbers. November, less than 10 months away. Where did all this come from? I asked. Such failed business ventures, real estate investments that tanked. He refinanced debt multiple times, kept kicking it down the road. But the investor note has a hard deadline with penalties. No extensions. No negotiations. Pay or get sued. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. Vernon, I'm not excusing what he's doing. The forgery, the conspiracy, the guardianship petition, all of it is criminal. But he's not just greedy. He's drowning. And he sees your house as the only life raft. I thought about last year. Brandon sitting in my kitchen asking me to co-sign a loan. Business opportunity, he'd said. Just needs my signature to secure better terms. I'd said no. Told him he needed to stand on his own 2 feet. Learn responsibility. Stop expecting his father to bail him out. 20 years ago, I sold my 1967 Mustang, the car I'd restored with my own hands, to bail Brandon out of his first financial crisis. This time, I'd said no, thinking I was teaching him responsibility. I'd been teaching him all right. Just not the lesson I'd intended. He asked me for help, I said quietly. Last year, I refused. Eleanor was silent for a moment. Then, and instead of accepting that, he decided to take what you wouldn't give him. That's not your fault, Vernon. That's his choice. I nodded, but the weight sat heavy in my chest anyway. That evening, I was at the rental house when my phone started buzzing. Notifications, dozens of them, Facebook. I opened the app, saw Brandon's name at the top of my feed. He'd posted a long message. Public. Tagged me. Included a photo of the lakeside home. I read it. My father walked out on his own family without a word. We are deeply concerned about his mental health and whereabouts. If anyone has seen Vernon Sutton, please contact us. We just want to know he's safe and get him the help he may need. Please share this, someone must have seen him. He's 71 years old, and we're worried about his well-being. The comments were already flooding in. While praying for your family, Brandon. Has anyone filed a missing persons report? Barton. Your poor father, dementia is such a terrible disease. I scrolled through them. Dozens. People I'd known for years. Church members. Former colleagues from the engineering firm. All expressing sympathy for Brandon. All worried about me. My phone buzzed again. Direct message. Old friend from the highway department. Vernon, are you okay? Brandon posted. He's worried about you. Let me know you're safe. Another message. Another. People who knew me, trusted me, believed I was missing, believed I needed help. Brandon's Facebook post was a declaration of war fought with lies and public sympathy. My silence wasn't surrender. It was the quiet before a legal storm he wouldn't see coming until it was too late to take cover. My phone rang. Brandon's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Same name. Voicemail. Again, voicemail. I texted Hazel, "Did you see the Facebook post?" Her reply came immediately. "I saw it. I'm already writing my response. With photos. Don't you worry, I've been documenting everything for 6 months. Let him dig his own grave." I set my phone down, looked around the empty rental house. Single folding table, 2 chairs, laptop, filing cabinet. I could post a response. Tell everyone the truth. Show them the forged documents, the security footage, the evidence of Brandon's conspiracy. But that would be playing his game. Fighting on his battlefield. Eleanor was preparing legal documents. The DA's office had the forgery report. DHS was reviewing the elder abuse complaint. Security footage was time-stamped and backed up. My answer wouldn't be words on Facebook. It would be legal paperwork. And that answer was coming soon enough. My phone rang again. Brandon, 6th call. I watched it ring. Watched it go to voicemail. 7th call, voicemail. 8th, 9th, 10th. I thought about answering. Imagined what I'd say. Imagined his voice, the same voice from the security footage, calm and methodical, as he plotted my destruction. 11th call. I watched Brandon's name flash on my screen one more time. Watched the phone vibrate against the folding table. Watched it go dark when the call ended. Then I set it face down and went back to work on the evidence timeline Eleanor had asked me to compile. I posted nothing to Facebook, sent no explanations to old friends, made no public defense. Because the people who mattered, Eleanor, Hazel, the investigators, already knew the truth. And the people who believed Brandon's lies would learn it soon enough when legal documents started arriving. Let him keep calling. Let him flood Facebook with concern and sympathy. Let the comments pile up with prayers and worries. None of it would matter when a judge saw the forged power of attorney under forensic light. None of it would matter when the DA reviewed security footage of Brandon's conspiracy call. None of it would matter when Margaret's 5 years of documentation showed exactly what kind of man our son had become. Brandon thought he was controlling the narrative. Thought public sympathy would somehow protect him. He'd forgotten something I'd tried to teach him when he was young. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to show up with evidence. And mine was coming. My phone buzzed one final time. Text from Hazel. Posted. Check your notifications in the morning. Sleep well, Vernon. Tomorrow the tide turns. I smiled for the first time in days. Set my phone on silent and went back to work. Watching that footage taught me something. Brandon wasn't just betraying me, he was desperate. The question was why. Eleanor answered it Monday morning. She slid the private investigator's report across her desk, and I saw a number that made my stomach drop. Not the $180,000 in debt Brandon had mentioned last year, but $340,000 in bold red ink with a deadline circled in marker November 30th, 2024. The investigator tracked down all of it, Eleanor said. She opened the file, pointed to itemized entries. Personal loans from 3 different lenders. Credit cards maxed at $47,000. And this, a private investor note for $125,000 due November 30th. If he doesn't pay, they file suit. I stared at the numbers. November. Less than 10 months away. Where did all this come from? I asked. Some failed business ventures. Real estate investments that tanked. He refinanced debt multiple times, kept kicking it down the road. But the investor note has a hard deadline with penalties. No extensions. No negotiations. Pay or get sued. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. Vernon, I'm not excusing what he's doing. The forgery, the conspiracy, the guardianship petition, all of it is criminal. But he's not just greedy. He's drowning. And he sees your house as the only life raft. I thought about last year. Brandon sitting in my kitchen asking me to co-sign a loan. Business opportunity, he'd said. Just needs my signature to secure better terms. I'd said no. Told him he needed to stand on his own 2 feet, learn responsibility, stop expecting his father to bail him out. 20 years ago, I sold my 1967 Mustang, the car I'd restored with my own hands, to bail Brandon out of his first financial crisis. This time, I'd said no, thinking I was teaching him responsibility. I'd been teaching him all right, just not the lesson I'd intended. He asked me for help, I said quietly. Last year, I refused. Eleanor was silent for a moment. Then, and instead of accepting that he decided to take what you wouldn't give him, "That's not your fault, Vernon. That's his choice." I nodded, but the weight sat heavy in my chest anyway. That evening, I was at the rental house when my phone started buzzing. Notifications, dozens of them. Facebook. I opened the app, saw Brandon's name at the top of my feed. He'd posted a long message. Public. Tagged me. Included a photo of the lakeside home. I read it. My father walked out on his own family without a word. "We are deeply concerned about his mental health and whereabouts. If anyone has seen Vernon Sutton, please contact us. We just want to know he's safe and get him the help he may need. Please share this, someone must have seen him. He's 71 years old, and we're worried about his well-being." The comments were already flooding in. "Praying for your family, Brandon. Has anyone filed a missing persons report? Your poor father, dementia is such a terrible disease." I scrolled through them. Dozens. People I'd known for years, church members, former colleagues from the engineering firm, all expressing sympathy for Brandon, all worried about me. My phone buzzed again. Direct message. Old friend from the highway department. "Vernon, are you okay? Brandon posted he's worried about you. Let me know you're safe." Another message. Another. People who knew me, trusted me, believed I was missing, believed I needed help. Brandon's Facebook post was a declaration of war fought with lies and public sympathy. My silence wasn't surrender. It was the quiet before a legal storm he wouldn't see coming until it was too late to take cover. My phone rang. Brandon's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Same name. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I texted Hazel. "Did you see the Facebook post?" Her reply came immediately. "I saw it. I'm already writing my response. With photos. Don't you worry, I've been documenting everything for 6 months. Let him dig his own grave." I set my phone down, looked around the empty rental house. Single folding table, 2 chairs, laptop, filing cabinet. I could post a response. Tell everyone the truth. Show them the forged documents, the security footage, the evidence of Brandon's conspiracy. But that would be playing his game, fighting on his battlefield. Eleanor was preparing legal documents. The DA's office had the forgery report. DHS was reviewing the elder abuse complaint. Security footage was time-stamped and backed up. My answer wouldn't be words on Facebook. It would be legal paperwork. And that answer was coming soon enough. My phone rang again. Brandon. 6th call. I watched it ring. Watched it go to voicemail. 7th call, voicemail. 8th, 9th, 10th. I thought about answering. Imagined what I'd say. Imagined his voice, the same voice from the security footage, calm and methodical as he plotted my destruction. 11th call. I watched Brandon's name flash on my screen one more time. Watched the phone vibrate against the folding table. Watched it go dark when the call ended. Then I set it face down and went back to work on the evidence timeline Eleanor had asked me to compile. I posted nothing to Facebook. Sent no explanations to old friends. Made no public defense. Because the people who mattered, Eleanor, Hazel, the investigators, already knew the truth. And the people who believed Brandon's lies would learn it soon enough when legal documents started arriving. Let him keep calling. Let him flood Facebook with concern and sympathy. Let the comments pile up with prayers and worries. None of it would matter when a judge saw the forged power of attorney under forensic light. None of it would matter when the DA reviewed security footage of Brandon's conspiracy call. None of it would matter when Margaret's 5 years of documentation showed exactly what kind of man our son had become. Brandon thought he was controlling the narrative, thought public sympathy would somehow protect him. He'd forgotten something I'd tried to teach him when he was young. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to show up with evidence. And mine was coming. My phone buzzed one final time. Text from Hazel. Unposted. Check your notifications in the morning. Sleep well, Vernon. Tomorrow the tide turns. I smiled for the first time in days, set my phone on silent, and went back to work. Thursday afternoon, I sat across from Gordon and Irene Whitfield at Riverside Cafe. Eleanor beside me, watching Roxanne's parents carry the weight of what they'd discovered. Gordon slid the property valuation across the table toward me with hands that trembled slightly, not from age but from the weight of what he was about to admit to a man his daughter had tried to destroy. January 2nd, the date was printed clearly at the top. "We didn't know," Gordon said. His voice was rough. "I swear to you, Vernon, we thought we were visiting. We thought Roxanne and Brandon needed help with the house. We didn't know they were planning to sell it until I found this in the kitchen drawer 2 weeks ago." Irene's eyes were red. She'd been crying. "We've been living in your bedroom. In the room where Margaret—" She stopped, started again. "We didn't know." I looked at the valuation, then at them. The coffee shop smelled like espresso and pastries. Morning light came through the windows. Everything normal except the conversation. "I believe you," I said. Gordon's shoulders sagged with relief. "But I don't need your apology," I continued. "I need your testimony. Can you testify to what you found? The dates, the documents, what you overheard." Eleanor was taking notes on her legal pad. She looked up at Gordon. He nodded slowly. "We can testify. We will testify. Against your own daughter," I said. Not a question. A confirmation. Irene reached across the table. Didn't touch me. Just laid her hand on the wood halfway between us. "At your anniversary party 10 years ago, Margaret took my hand in the kitchen while you and Gordon were outside grilling. She said you were the best man she'd ever met. Said she was grateful every day for you." She paused, swallowed. I think she knew even then what might come. I think that's why she prepared everything you're finding now. She was protecting you years before you needed it. I sat across from these two elderly people, strangers, who'd been used as weapons against me, and felt something unexpected. Not anger, not even satisfaction. Just the profound sadness of watching a family destroy itself from the inside. "We'll testify," Gordon said again. "Whatever you need," Eleanor made another note. "I'll be in touch about deposition scheduling. For now, document everything you can remember. Dates, conversations, where you found documents." They left 20 minutes later. I stayed at the table with Eleanor. "Hi, they're genuine," she said. "I've seen enough witnesses to know when someone's lying. They're horrified." "They should be," I said. "Their daughter tried to steal my house." Eleanor's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, answered. "Yes, when—" Pause. "I see. Send me the documentation." She hung up, looked at me. Brandon's guardianship petition was preliminarily rejected this morning. Lack of independent medical evidence. The judge requested psychiatric evaluation from a court-appointed doctor, not Brandon's chosen physician. I felt something loosen in my chest. So he can't declare me incompetent. Not without an actual evaluation proving it. Which you'll pass because you're not incompetent. You're sharper than most 40-year-olds. That night, 30 miles away at the lakeside home, Brandon's world was collapsing. I didn't see this. Eleanor told me later what happened. But apparently Roxanne came home from work and said nothing. Just walked past Brandon. Cold silence. He knew. Your parents met with him, Brandon said. Not a question. Roxanne turned. My parents met with Vernon and his attorney. Yes. Without telling me. Because they found your property valuation dated 2 weeks before that dinner, where you promised me this was all legal and clean. It is legal. The DA's office has a forgery report, Brandon. Your attorney called me today. The guardianship petition was rejected. Everything you promised would work is falling apart. What does desperation sound like? It sounds like a 44-year-old man screaming at a broker to sell his father's house at any price, forgetting that desperation is precisely what makes predators circle and allies vanish. Brandon called his attorney. Got worse news. The forged power of attorney had been submitted to the DA. Investigation opened. Criminal charges possible. What do you mean, charges? Brandon's voice cracked. What do you mean the DA is investigating? You said this would work. Roxanne stood in the doorway of the living room, my living room, and watched her husband unravel. This is your mess, she said. Ice cold. Sloppy forged paperwork. You said your lawyer checked everything. You said we'd have the house sold by March. Now my own parents are testifying against us. Against you, Brandon shot back. They're testifying against you too. You're the one who brought them here. You're the one who said we needed props to make it look legitimate. Their alliance was fracturing. Desperation does that. Turns co-conspirators into survivors looking for someone to blame. Eleanor pieced together what happened that night from the broker's own account, given later when he came seeking immunity. Brandon grabbed his phone, called the real estate broker. I don't care about market value, he screamed into the phone. Find a buyer now. Any price. I need this done before November 30th or I lose everything. The broker apparently tried to calm him down. Brandon hung up, threw his phone on the couch. Roxanne watched him, then quietly left the room. The next day, Eleanor called me. Hi, Vernon, I need to tell you something. I was at the rental house, laptop open, working on timeline documentation. What happened? That real estate broker Brandon called yesterday, the one he screamed at to find a buyer at any price. Yes. He contacted my office a week ago, before Brandon's call. He was looking for protection from criminal conspiracy charges. Wants immunity in exchange for testimony. I set down my coffee cup, stared at the wall. He's been documenting everything. Every email, every phone call, every instruction Brandon gave him about selling your property without your knowledge or consent. He realized what he was being asked to do was illegal and started building his own defense. Every desperate move Brandon made, every frantic phone call was being documented and turned into evidence by people trying to save themselves. He thought he was fighting for survival. He was actually building his own prosecution. When is he coming in? I asked. Tomorrow morning, Eleanor said. With everything, emails, recordings, text messages, Vernon. She paused. We're not just going to win. We're going to bury him. The broker arrived Friday morning. Derek Holloway, the real estate broker Brandon had hired 3 months earlier, promising a $30,000 commission, walked through Eleanor's door, seeking immunity, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who'd chosen self-preservation over client loyalty the moment criminal charges emerged. I was already there. Eleanor had called me an hour earlier. Derek set his leather portfolio on the conference table, stood there looking nervous. I need immunity, he said. Brandon Sutton promised me a substantial commission but paid nothing up front. Now there's forgery charges and elder abuse investigations. I can't afford to be implicated in this. Eleanor gestured to a chair. Show us what you have. He opened the portfolio, pulled out printed emails, text screenshots, a recording device. Everything Brandon sent me over the past 3 months. Eleanor took the first email, passed it to me. Subject line property preparation. Body. Derek need owner removed from property to enable clean sale. Can you handle discreet listing for motivated seller owner has declining capacity family handling transition? Need this done quietly and fast. Date December 20th. 3 weeks before the Sunday dinner. I stared at my son's words. Owner has declining capacity. He'd been planning this since before Christmas. There's more, Derek said. Another email. January 5th, 4 days before your dinner. And Sikri, Derek timeline accelerating. We'll have owner out of property by mid-January. Begin preparing listing materials. Target price 800,000 minimum, need fast sale. Eleanor was taking notes. How much did he promise you? Yeah, 30,000 if I could close within 60 days of listing. And how much up front? Nothing. Said he'd pay from sale proceeds. This was the midpoint, not just of the legal battle, but of everything. Before today, I'd been defending what was mine. After today, I would be taking back what my son tried to steal. The difference wasn't tactical. It was existential. Chukis, add this to the file, I said. Every email, every text, every piece of evidence showing my son planned this before he asked me to leave. Derek handed over more documents. Screenshots. Recorded calls where Brandon discussed property staging, market timing, how to handle a sale when the old man isn't cooperative. One recording, Brandon's voice, clear, methodical. We just need him out long enough to establish vacancy. Once he's been gone 30 days, we can argue abandonment and expedite conservatorship. Eleanor looked at me. This is everything we need. Premeditation. Conspiracy. Elder abuse. Derek shifted in his chair. So do I get immunity? I'll recommend it to the prosecutor, Eleanor said. You cooperate fully, provide testimony, you'll likely avoid charges. But that's the DA's call. He nodded, left the portfolio, walked out looking relieved. Eleanor and I spent another hour organizing evidence. Then I drove back to the rental house. Before I tell you what happened when I opened that photo album that night, are you still here? Comment, if you think I should proceed with the legal notice, or B, if I should give my son one last chance and add one short reason so I can see how you're reading this story. Please note what follows contains recreated details for narrative purposes, but the emotional truth is what I hope stays with you. That night I sat alone at the folding table. Tomorrow Eleanor would send the formal notice. Certified mail. Demand to vacate. Criminal complaints attached. I'd been avoiding something for weeks. A box in the closet. Photo albums I'd grabbed that first night. I opened it. First album, first page. Brandon at 5 years old. Standing in front of the house, framing in 1998. Wearing a little hard hat I'd bought him. Grinning. I remember this day. He asked what we were building. I said a home for our family. Forever. He believed me. I believed me. Next page. College graduation 2002. My hand on Brandon's shoulder, both smiling. He'd just finished his business degree. Told me he wanted to make me proud. I turned the page. Brandon's wedding 2015. 11 years ago. I was dancing with Roxanne. Brandon in the background looking happy. I told her that night, take care of my boy. She'd said I will. I cried that night. For the first time since Margaret died, I sat alone in the dark and cried not for what I was about to lose, but for what I'd already lost years ago when my son stopped being the boy in these photographs. How many years had it been? When did Brandon change? Or had he always been this person, and I'd refused to see it? Margaret had seen it. She'd documented it for 5 years. She'd known. I closed the album, wiped my face, sat in the darkness. Then I picked up my phone and called Eleanor. Send the notice tomorrow morning, I said. Voice steady. Certified mail. It's time. I'm ready. Are you certain? I'm certain. Vernon, once we trigger the disinheritance clause, there's no reversing it. The trust is irrevocable in that regard. Brandon will be permanently removed as beneficiary. I know, and you're at peace with that. I looked at the closed album on the table, thought about the boy in the hard hat, the graduate, the groom. No, I said. I'm not at peace with it, but I'm doing it anyway. Eleanor was quiet. Then, I'll prepare the documents tonight. They'll go out Monday morning. I hung up. People always ask, what was the hardest part? They think it was the eviction, or discovering the forgery, or watching my son plot against me on camera. They're wrong. The hardest moment was that night. The night I decided to trigger a clause I'd spent 10 years hoping I would never need to use. The night I looked at photographs of a boy who no longer existed and authorized the legal destruction of whatever relationship we had left. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. Because protecting the promise I made to Margaret mattered more than protecting the illusion that my son might somehow someday become the man I'd raised him to be. I put the album back in the box, closed it, put it in the closet. Monday morning, certified mail would arrive at the lakeside home, and Brandon would learn that hope had finally run out. Eleanor sent the documents Monday morning. Certified mail, 3-day delivery. The truck pulled into the lakeside driveway at 9:17, and when Brandon Sutton signed for the thick envelope from Eleanor Blackwell's law office, he had no idea he was signing for the end of everything he'd spent 3 months trying to steal. I wasn't there. Eleanor told me later what happened. Brandon carried the envelope to the kitchen table. Roxanne was drinking coffee. He opened it. Formal notice from the trust office. 2 pages, legal language, clear demands. Formal notice to vacate premises within 30 days. Brandon read aloud. His voice was breaking. Criminal forgery investigation opened with District Attorney's Office. Elder financial abuse report filed with Oregon Department of Human Services. Roxanne set down her coffee. What? Brandon's hands were shaking so badly he had to set the first page down. Picked up the second. A copy of the trust agreement. 20 pages. 1 clause highlighted in yellow. He read it. Read it again. Then his hands started trembling worse. Roxanne took the papers from him. Disinheritance trigger, she read aloud. Coercive interference with grantor's property rights or fraudulent legal action against grantor automatically removes beneficiary designation and redirects assets to named charitable organization. She looked up at Brandon. Her face was white. This means you get nothing, she said. The house stays his. You're completely cut out. 0 inheritance. Brandon, he wasn't listening. He was staring at the third attachment. The criminal forgery report, filed with the DA. His name, specific statutes cited. Felony forgery in the 1st degree. He can't do this, Brandon said, to himself, to the room, to nobody. It's my inheritance. It's my father's house. He can't just... Roxanne was silent, just staring at the papers. That afternoon at 2 Roxanne walked into Eleanor's office. Alone. No Brandon, no attorney of her own. Eleanor called me immediately afterward. Your daughter-in-law just left my office, she said. She came alone, said she didn't know about the forged power of attorney that was Brandon's scheme. She only knew about selling the house. She's offering to testify to the full timeline of the conspiracy in exchange for immunity from forgery prosecution. I was quiet for a moment. What exactly did she tell you? Everything. Dates, conversations, who said what when, how Brandon approached her about selling the house back in December, how they planned the dinner, how they brought her parents as props to justify the eviction. She logged every detail. How quickly does loyalty evaporate when criminal charges appear, faster than you'd think? Roxanne read that notice with Brandon at 9:20 a.m. By 2:00 p.m., she was sitting in Eleanor's office offering to testify against him. "She's not doing this out of conscience, Vernon," Eleanor continued. "She's doing it because the ship is sinking and she wants a lifeboat. Self-preservation, not morality." "I understand," I said. "Did you promise her anything?" "So nothing. I took detailed notes, logged the conversation, told her I'd discuss with the DA. But Vernon, she's willing to testify. Your son's own wife." I hung up, sat at the folding table in the rental house. Brandon's wife had just become a prosecution witness. That night late, Hazel called. How are you doing?" she asked. "Big meeting on Wednesday." "I'm ready." "Yo, are you really?" I thought about that. 44 years ago, I carried him from the hospital. The nurse handed me this tiny baby and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Sutton, you're a father." I remember thinking, I will protect this child forever. Vernon. 35 years ago, I taught him how to read blueprints. He was 9 years old, sitting on my lap at the kitchen table, and I showed him how to see a building before it existed. He loved it. Hazel was quiet on the other end. 20 years ago, I sold my 1967 Mustang, the car I'd restored with my own hands, to bail him out of his first financial crisis. I never told him what I'd sacrificed. I just handed him the check. "Margaret used to say something," Hazel said softly. "She said the hardest part of loving someone is knowing when to stop protecting them from the consequences of their own choices. She knew you'd face this decision someday, Vernon. That's why she prepared everything." I looked at my laptop. One file left on the USB. File 7. I'd been avoiding it. "I have to go, Hazel. Thank you for calling." I hung up. Clicked File 7. A photograph filled the screen. Me and Margaret, standing in front of the lakeside house. 1998. The day we finished construction. Both of us covered in sawdust, wearing work clothes, arms around each other, smiling like we'd conquered the world together. We had no idea that 26 years later, I'd be fighting our own son to protect what we'd built. Below the photo, handwritten message in Margaret's careful script. "Kinda, we built it together. Protect it together. I love you. Always, Margaret." I held that photograph, Margaret and me, in front of the house we'd just finished building, both of us smiling. We had no idea what was coming. The cancer that would take her. The son who would betray me. The fight I'd have to wage alone. But she'd known something might come. That's why she'd prepared everything. The USB files, the documentation, the evidence. She'd protected me even after she was gone. I touched the screen where her face was, traced the line of her smile. "I won't let him take it," I said aloud to the empty room, to Margaret, to the promise we'd made. "I won't let him take what we built together." I closed the laptop, sat in the darkness. Tomorrow was Tuesday. Wednesday morning at 10:00 a.m. the confrontation would begin. Eleanor had sent Brandon a formal meeting request. His attorney had confirmed he'd attend. I would walk into that conference room. My son would be sitting there, probably with excuses, probably with justifications, and I would place on that table everything I'd prepared over 10 years. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence Margaret had helped me gather. Not out of hatred, out of love for a promise I'd made to my wife. We built it together, protect it together. I would. Wednesday morning, 10 o'clock. I sat beside Eleanor in the conference room waiting. Brandon Sutton walked through the door at precisely 10:00 a.m. alone. No attorney beside him, no Roxanne. And in the 3 months since that January dinner where he'd thrown his father out, he'd aged what looked like 3 years. His face was thinner, hair grayer at the temples, eyes shadowed like he hadn't been sleeping. He wore a suit, but it hung on him wrong, like he'd lost weight. He stopped just inside the door, looked at me, looked at Eleanor, then at the empty chair across the table. "Sit down, Mr. Sutton," Eleanor said. He sat. The conference room smelled like coffee and leather. Windows overlooking downtown Portland. Gray March sky. Everything professional. Sterile. Cold. Brandon's hands were shaking. He clasped them together on the table. Dad, listen. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. Started again. This has gotten completely out of hand. I was trying to protect you. Your memory has been slipping, and I thought the power of attorney was just a safety measure in case something happened, and... Eleanor placed the first file folder on the table between them. She didn't speak. Just set it down with deliberate precision. Brandon stopped mid-sentence. Stared at the folder. These are emails you sent Derek Holloway 3 months ago, Eleanor said. Her voice was cold, professional. Subject line, property preparation. Quote, need owner removed from property to enable clean sale. Owner has declining capacity, family handling transition. She opened the folder, turned it to face Brandon, printed emails, date stamps clear, his name on everyone. Brandon's face went pale. I was just exploring options in case. Eleanor placed the second folder on the table. Again, no words, just the folder landing with a soft thud. Security camera footage, she said. Audio transcript, your voice, January 10th. Quote, once we get him declared incompetent, the trust is dissolved and the house transfers to us. The lawyer said it takes about 60 days from filing to court approval. She opened that folder too. Transcript, timestamps, screenshots from the video. Brandon on the phone in my living room. Date and time stamped, irrefutable. Brandon's hands were shaking worse now. Dad, that was taken out of context. Eleanor placed the third folder on the table. I sat there watching Eleanor dismantle my son's lies file by file and felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not even anger anymore. Just the hollow ache of watching someone I loved realize in real time that every escape route had been closed. Forensic analysis of the power of attorney, Eleanor said. She opened the third folder, pulled out enlarged photographs of the document, arrows pointing to specific text. The asset management clause, this section here, added after your father's signature dried. Different ink density, different pen pressure. See the analysis. She pushed forward a second document. Independent handwriting expert. Credentials attached. Conclusion, fraudulent alteration. Felony forgery under Oregon Revised Statutes 165-1013. Brandon was reading the forensic report. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. Evidence doesn't argue. It doesn't raise its voice. It just sits on a table in neat folders and waits for you to read it. And when you're done reading, there's nowhere left to run. Mr. Sutton, Eleanor said, do you have anything to say about these 3 files? Brandon opened his mouth, closed it, looked at me, then back at the documents. He stopped, swallowed. I didn't mean. Eleanor placed the fourth folder on the table. Brandon stared at it. The cover page was visible through the clear folder. Typed header, confidential witness statement, Roxanne Sutton. Brandon's eyes widened. Roxanne. This is the signed transcript of my private meeting with your wife, Eleanor said. She came to my office without you, without an attorney of her own, seeking immunity from the forgery charges. Brandon's hand reached for the folder. Stopped halfway. She didn't tell me. When did she? March 18th, Monday, 2 days ago. Eleanor opened the folder. She provided everything, the full timeline of your conspiracy. Who originated the power of attorney alteration plan? Your text message exchanges discussing the incompetence strategy. Property sale planning. She volunteered all of it to protect herself from your criminal charges. Brandon was reading now, flipping through pages, his wife's testimony, Signed, dated, notarized. I watched him read their private text messages printed as exhibits, conversations they'd had in bed, plans they'd made together. Roxanne's words transcribed for the legal record. She said, Brandon's voice broke. She told you all of this. She was very thorough, Eleanor said. Very cooperative. She's seeking immunity, Mr. Sutton. She's willing to testify against you in court if the DA files charges. Brandon set down the transcript. His hands were trembling so badly the pages rustled. So, my wife, he said, to himself, to the room, to nobody. My own wife. He looked up at Eleanor, then at me. I hadn't spoken since he entered. Hadn't said a single word. Just sat there watching Eleanor present 4 files, watching my son's defenses crumble, watching him realize his wife had betrayed him the same way he'd betrayed me. Duh, Brandon said. His voice was barely a whisper. Please, I held up one hand. He stopped. I looked at Eleanor. She understood. Stood quietly, stepped back from the table. Now it was just Brandon and me, father and son, across polished wood and 4 folders of evidence. I took a breath. Brandon, I said. My voice was calm, steady. I need you to hear something, not from Eleanor, from me. He was staring at me, waiting. His eyes were wet. For the first time since that January dinner, I looked my son directly in the eye and prepared to say the words I'd been holding for 3 months. The words that would define 44 years of fatherhood. The words that would finally let him go. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The words came out quiet, almost flat, like I'd been carrying them for so long. They'd worn all the sharp edges smooth. But 34 years ago, I said, I carried you from the hospital. You were 6 pounds 3 ounces. The nurse handed you to me wrapped in a blue blanket and said, Congratulations, Mr. Sutton, you're a father. I remember thinking I will protect this child forever. Brandon was staring at me. His eyes were red. When you were 6, I taught you to ride a bike. You fell 17 times. I counted. Every time you got back on the 18th try, you pedaled down the driveway by yourself. You were grinning so wide I thought your face would split. I paused, took a breath. When you were 23, you called me at 2 in the morning from a police station. DUI. No one hurt, thank God. But you needed bail money. I sold my 1967 Mustang, the car I'd restored with my own hands, to get you out. I never told you that. Just handed you the money and said we all make mistakes. Brandon's hands were on the conference table. Fingers spread flat, trembling slightly. Same hands I'd held when teaching him to ride that bike. When you were 28, you asked me to co-sign a business loan. You said it was a good opportunity. Just needed my signature to get better terms. I said no. His eyes flickered. He remembered. You got angry. I continued. Said I didn't believe in you. Said I didn't trust you. But that wasn't it. I was trying to teach you something. That you had to stand on your own. That I wouldn't always be there to catch you. I looked at Eleanor. She was standing by the window. Silent witness. 10 years ago, I set up a trust. You asked me why. I said it was for estate planning, tax purposes. But that wasn't the whole truth. I turned back to Brandon. The trust had a clause, a disinheritance trigger. If you ever tried to take the house through fraud or coercion, you'd lose everything. I wrote that clause, hoping I'd never need it. I told myself Brandon would never do this. My son would never. My voice caught. I cleared my throat. But I was wrong. I didn't set up the trust because I didn't trust you, Brandon. I set it up because I feared what the world might do to you and what you might do to yourself. I was right to be afraid. I just had the wrong enemy in mind. Brandon was crying now, silently, tears running down his face. Roxanne was looking away, at the wall, at nothing. I love you, I said. I have always loved you. But love doesn't mean I let you take what isn't yours. Love doesn't mean I stand by while you forge documents and try to have me declared incompetent. Love doesn't mean I pretend this didn't happen. I stood up. Eleanor, I said, I'm ready for the next step. Eleanor nodded, gathered her files. Brandon looked up at me. Dad, please. I walked out of the conference room without looking back. 3 blocks away, there was a notary office. Small, professional, smelled like coffee and paper. Eleanor had called ahead. They were expecting us. The notary was a woman in her 50s. Gray hair, reading glasses on a chain. She'd done this 1,000 times. Just another legal document. Just another signature. She didn't know it was 44 years of fatherhood compressed into ink on paper. Eleanor placed the trust amendment in front of me. 2 pages. Legal language. Clear terms. This removes Brandon Sutton as beneficiary, Eleanor said. Quiet. Professional. Legal basis, coercive interference with grantors' property rights and forgery of legal documents. As living grantor and sole trustee, you have absolute unilateral amendment rights under Oregon trust law. No court approval required. Effective immediately upon notarization. I read it. Every word. Assets would redirect to the Oregon Housing Support Fund. Charitable organization. Help people who needed homes. $25,000 to Hazel Greer. Small acknowledgement of 30 years of friendship. Of loyalty, of watching over me when Margaret couldn't anymore. Everything else to charity. Brandon would get nothing. The notary's stamp sat on the desk. Heavy brass, worn smooth from years of use. 1 press and 44 years of fatherhood would compress into a legal technicality. Sign here, the notary said, pointed to the line. I picked up the pen, thought about Brandon at 5 years old in that hard hat. At his college graduation, at his wedding, thought about Margaret's voice on that USB recording. Protect it together, I signed. The notary witnessed, added her signature, took the stamp, pressed it onto the document with a solid thunk. Official seal, State of Oregon, dated and certified. She made 3 copies, handed me 1, filed 1, gave 1 to Eleanor. That's complete, she said. Legally binding as of this moment. I stared at the certified copy in my hands. 10 years ago, I wrote that disinheritance clause sitting in Eleanor's office with Margaret beside me. She'd held my hand while I signed it. Told me, you're protecting what we built. That's not cruelty. That's love. I'd hoped I'd never use it, but here I was. March 13th, 2024, Wednesday afternoon. Holding a document that removed my son from my will. From my trust, from any claim to the house Margaret and I built together. I didn't feel triumphant, just very tired. Eleanor slid the certified copy into a manila envelope, sealed it, wrote the date on the front in her precise handwriting. March 13th, 2024, the day I stopped being Brandon's safety net. What happens now? I asked. Eleanor looked at me. Now we inform them. Brandon and Roxanne need to know the amendment has been executed. They have 30 days to vacate the property. They're still at your office. I told them to wait. Said there would be additional documentation. I nodded. Let's go back. We walked the 3 blocks in silence. March wind, gray sky, Portland afternoon. Brandon and Roxanne were still in the conference room when we returned, sitting exactly where we'd left them. Brandon's eyes were swollen from crying. Roxanne looked pale. Eleanor placed the manila envelope on the table between them. This is a certified copy of the trust amendment, she said. Executed and notarized this afternoon. Brandon Sutton has been removed as beneficiary under the disinheritance clause. The property remains with Vernon Sutton. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Brandon stared at the envelope. You all ready? It's already done. Yes, Eleanor said. As of 2:47 p.m. today, he'd lost everything and was only now finding out. Brandon stared at the manila envelope on Eleanor's conference table. Couldn't speak. Couldn't move. I left him there, walked out, drove back to the rental house. 4 days later, Eleanor called me and said 3 words. It's all happening. What's happening? Everything, she said. Can you come to my office? I drove downtown, sat across from her desk. She had a file folder open. Multiple documents. Your son is facing 3 separate legal actions, Eleanor said. 4 if you count his marriage. Tell me. She pulled out the first document. The district attorney opened a formal forgery investigation. Brandon's been advised to retain criminal defense counsel. They're reviewing all the evidence we submitted, the altered power of attorney, the forensic analysis, the timeline of conspiracy. Second document. Oregon Department of Human Services received the elder abuse report. They're conducting their own review, separate from the DA, could result in civil penalties or protective orders. Third document. The private investor holding Brandon's debt remember the $340,000 due in November. The loan hit maturity early under an acceleration clause. Something about fraud allegations triggering default provisions. They filed suit last week. I sat quietly, taking it in. 4 legal dominoes all falling at once. I didn't push them. I just stopped standing in their way. And Roxanne, I asked. Filed for divorce, Eleanor said. Tuesday morning, her attorney cited irreconcilable differences and financial fraud. Apparently, she didn't know the full extent of Brandon's hidden liabilities until the lawsuits started arriving. She knew enough to help him try to steal my house. True, Eleanor said. But she's trying to distance herself now. Save what she can before Brandon's legal problems drag her down too. I thought about Roxanne sitting in that conference room, reading her own testimony, realizing she'd traded her marriage for immunity that might not even protect her. And the house, I asked. Untouchable, Eleanor said. The trust is impenetrable to all of it. Brandon's creditors can't touch it. The lawsuits can't reach it. Even if he's convicted of felony forgery, your property remains yours absolutely. I nodded. Vernon, Eleanor said quietly. Are you all right? I don't know, I said honestly. Ask me in a few months. That afternoon, I drove to the lakeside home, my home. The driveway looked the same. The lawn needed mowing. March rain had left puddles on the walkway. I pulled my key from my pocket. The same key I'd carried for 26 years. Turned it in the lock. The click was familiar. 10,000 times I'd turned that key. But this time my hand didn't shake. The door opened. Empty house. Quiet. The smell was different. Someone else's soap. Someone else's cooking. But the bones were mine. The structure I'd built. I walked through the living room, where Brandon had stood on the phone planning my incompetence declaration, where Roxanne had brought her parents as props, where that January dinner had shattered everything, the kitchen where I'd cooked pot roast for people who were plotting against me, the hallway where I'd stood packing suitcases while my son watched without helping, the master bedroom, empty now. Brandon and Roxanne had taken their things. The bed was different, new sheets, new comforter. But the room was the same room where Margaret had died 3 years ago, where she'd held my hand and told me I'd be all right. I walked to the window, looked out at the lake, the same view Margaret and I had shared every morning for 25 years. Coffee on the porch, sun rising over the water. Her hand in mine. She was gone. Brandon was gone. Roxanne was gone. But the house was still here, still standing, still mine. I heard footsteps on the porch. Turned. Hazel stood at the open door. 74 years old. My neighbor for 26 years. Margaret's friend. The woman who documented everything when no one else was watching. "Welcome home," she said softly. I smiled. First real smile in weeks. "Yeah. Home." She stepped inside, looked around. "It feels different, doesn't it?" "Yes, but it's still yours." "Yes." She walked over to the brick wall by the fireplace. The wall I'd built myself. Every brick laid by hand. Margaret used to tell me, Hazel said, that this house was your masterpiece. Not the bridges you engineered. Not the highways. This house. Because you built it for love, not for money. I walked over, placed my hand against the brick. Cool, solid. Rough texture worn smooth in places from years of Margaret leaning against it while we talked. I laid every brick, I said. Margaret handed me the mortar. We did it together. Hazel nodded. She knew you'd fight for it. That's why she prepared everything. She knew before I did. She always did. Hazel smiled. I'll leave you alone. But I'm next door if you need anything. Anything at all. She left. I stood in my house. My home. The place I'd built with my own hands for the woman I'd loved for 47 years. Brandon was facing criminal charges, debt lawsuits, divorce. Everything collapsing. I should have felt something. Satisfaction, vindication, something. But I just felt tired. That night I slept in the master bedroom for the first time in 2 months. In the bed where Margaret had died. In the house we'd built together. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the wind blow across the lake. The same sound I'd heard every night for 26 years. For 3 years since Margaret died, I'd lain awake in this bed thinking about what I'd lost. Her laugh, her touch, her voice. The mornings we'd shared. But tonight I didn't lie awake thinking about loss. I just lay still, breathing, listening to the wind. The house I'd built still stood. The promise I'd made to Margaret was still kept. Brandon had tried to take it. Failed. Roxanne had tried to take it. Failed. The house remained. I remained. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't fight sleep. Didn't stare at the ceiling, didn't replay everything that had gone wrong. I just closed my eyes and let the sound of the wind carry me away. Home. I slept through the night for the first time in 3 years. Woke to sunlight on the lake. 2 days later, Eleanor called. Can you come by the office? There's something I need to give you. I drove downtown, walked into her office. She was holding a white envelope. Sealed. Margaret's handwriting across the flap in blue ink. Give to Vernon only when everything is over. Eleanor handed me an envelope I didn't know existed, sealed with Margaret's handwriting across the flap. Instructions she'd left 3 years ago. Oh, she gave this to me the week before she died, Eleanor said. Told me to hold it until the conflict was resolved, until you were safe. I've had it in my vault ever since. I stared at Margaret's handwriting, familiar loops, the way she wrote my name. Open it, Eleanor said gently. I broke the seal. Inside, several pages of Margaret's careful script, handwritten, dated 2 months before she died. I read, My dearest Vernon, if you're reading this, it means what I feared has begun. It means Brandon has made his choice. It means you've had to fight, and knowing you, it means you've won because you are stronger than you ever believed. I need you to know something. I suspected. Not everything, not the details. But I saw signs. The way Brandon looked at the house when he thought no one was watching. The questions he asked about the trust. The times he tried to talk me out of the disinheritance clause. I never told you. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I was afraid. Afraid it would hurt you to know. Afraid you'd confront him before you were ready. Afraid it would break your heart to face it while I was still here. So I prepared instead. I documented what I could. I asked Eleanor and Hazel to watch. I gave you the tools you would need when the time came. I didn't leave you a weapon, Vernon. I left you the truth. You already had the strength. I love you. I have always loved you. The house was never just a house. It was our promise to each other. Protect it. You have. I'm proud of you. Always, Margaret. I folded the letter carefully, held it against my chest. "Ah, thank you," I said, out loud, to Margaret, to Eleanor, to the air. I didn't let you down. Eleanor's eyes were wet. She knew you wouldn't. I drove home, sat on the porch with Margaret's letter in my pocket, touching it, knowing she'd known, knowing she'd trusted me. Gordon's coffee cup sat on the porch railing, chipped blue ceramic. Same one Margaret used to serve her parents 20 years ago when they visited for Christmas. Gordon and Irene had called the day before, asked if they could visit, just to say goodbye before they returned to their own lives. They arrived mid-morning, drove up in their old sedan, got out slowly, looked older than I remembered. We sat on the porch, didn't go inside, just sat drinking coffee, gazing at the lake. Gordon was quiet for a long time. Then, married 42 years. I look at what happened to your son, to our daughter, and I think, where did we go wrong? I sipped my coffee, thought about that. I don't know, I said honestly. But the question itself means you haven't gone as wrong as you think. Gordon looked at me. How do you figure the people who really failed don't ask where they went wrong? They just blame everyone else. Irene was crying quietly. She reached over, touched my hand, didn't say anything, just touched it, then pulled back. "Take care of yourself, Vernon," she said. They left an hour later, drove away down the lakeside road. I watched their car disappear. Two families destroyed by two children who'd made the same choice. Greed over love, money over loyalty. But Gordon and Irene had asked the right question. Where did we go wrong? Maybe that was the beginning of getting it right. That night late, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. "Dad, I'm sorry. I know you're not ready to see me. I know you might never be ready. I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry." I stared at the screen, read it 3 times. Brandon. Hazel was sitting by the fireplace. She'd brought dinner, stayed to keep me company, saw my face. "What is it?" she asked. I handed her my phone. She read it, handed it back. "Will you answer?" I sat quietly for a long time, holding the phone, thinking about 44 years. The hospital, the bike, the bail money, the business loan, the Sunday dinner, the forged documents, the trust amendment. "My son." "Not yet," I said finally. "Maybe not this year, but I don't know. He's still my son." Hazel smiled. First genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. Not cold, not sharp, just real. Warm. "So Margaret would say that's the most honest answer you've ever given." I gave a small laugh. First one in months. "She would, wouldn't she? She knew you," Hazel said. "Knew you'd fight when you had to. Knew you'd grieve when it was over. Knew you wouldn't force yourself to feel something you didn't feel. She knew me better than I knew myself. That's what 47 years together does." Hazel left at 9, hugged me at the door, said she'd see me tomorrow. I sat alone by the fireplace. Early Oregon rain fell onto the lake outside the window. April rain, spring rain, the kind that washes everything clean. First Easter in 47 years sitting alone in this house. 47 years. Margaret and me. Every Easter together. Sunrise service at the church. Brunch on this porch. Her laugh, her hand in mine. Now just me, alone. But I didn't feel lonely. I felt quiet, peaceful, like something had finally settled. The house still stood. The promise still held. Margaret's letter in my pocket. Brandon's text on my phone. I didn't have to answer yet. Didn't have to decide. Didn't have to know. I could just sit here, listen to the rain, be home. That was enough. Easter morning. Light through the windows. The house quiet around me. My phone rang at 8. Eleanor, I answered. Happy Easter. Happy Easter, Vernon. A pause. I have an update about Brandon and Roxanne. I wasn't sure if you'd want to hear it, but I thought you should know. I sat at the kitchen table, looked out at the lake. Tell me. Roxanne moved into an apartment in Beaverton last week. Divorce proceedings are officially underway. She's seeking full separation of assets and debts. And Brandon, working with a criminal defense attorney. The DA's offering a plea deal misdemeanor forgery with probation in exchange for full cooperation. No jail time if he complies with all terms. His attorney's advising him to take it. I absorbed that. What about the debts? Restructuring. The investor lawsuit is moving forward, but Brandon's negotiating a payment plan. He's renting a small room near downtown, working part-time at a modest real estate office. Not the high-end firm he used to work for. Just surviving. Was this what victory looked like? My son in a rented room working part-time and me relieved he still had a job at all. There's something else, Eleanor said. Brandon contacted my office yesterday. Asked if you'd read his text message. I told him you had. I was quiet. He was silent for a moment. Eleanor continued. Then he said thank you. Just that. Thank you. Then he hung up. I looked at Margaret's letter on the kitchen counter, at my phone with Brandon's unanswered text. That's enough for me to know, I said. Eleanor understood. Call me if you need anything. Otherwise, enjoy your Easter. I hung up, sat in the quiet house. Brandon was still out there, still breathing, still working, still trying to put his life back together after tearing it apart himself. I should have felt something. Triumph, vindication, something. But I just felt tired, and quiet, and strangely at peace. That afternoon, I drove to Sunset Hills Cemetery. I'd bought flowers that morning. The small white ones Margaret had loved. The kind I brought every year on Easter, on her birthday, on our anniversary. The cemetery was quiet. Light rain falling. April rain. Soft, gentle. I found her grave. Simple headstone. Gray marble. Margaret Ann Sutton, 1953-2021, beloved wife. I placed the flowers on the wet grass. Knelt down. Touched the stone. Cold, smooth, rain-slicked. Happy Easter, I said aloud. I'm sorry I'm late. There's been a lot happening. The rain fell softly. No one else around. Just me and the headstone and the flowers. I need to tell you everything, I said, from the beginning. So I told her. About the January dinner. Brandon's demand. Leaving the house. The motel. The USB drive she'd left. File by file. Evidence by evidence. You knew, I said. You knew what he was planning. You knew I'd need proof. So you gave it to me. Light rain on marble headstone, same rain falling on the lake at home on the roof. Brandon rented across town on the courthouse where his plea deal waited. Well, Eleanor gave me your last letter, I said. The sealed one. You told me you didn't leave me a weapon. You left me the truth. You were right. You were right about everything. You always were. I traced her name on the stone. Margaret Ann, my wife for 47 years. Brandon sent me a text, apologized, said he knows I'm not ready to see him. He's right. I'm not. But, I paused, trying to find the words. I don't know what to do about him yet. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But I think you'd say give it time. Don't force it. Don't pretend to feel something I don't feel. Just give it time. The rain kept falling. I kept kneeling there, hand on the wet stone. He's working part-time now, living in a rented room, facing criminal charges, divorced. Everything he tried to steal from me, he's lost anyway. Different way, harder way, but lost. I thought about that. About justice. About consequences. About 44 years of being a father. I should feel something, I said. Satisfaction. Revenge. Something. But I don't. I just feel tired. And sad. And grateful I still have the house. Our house. The promise we made. I stood up, knees stiff from kneeling on wet grass. I sleep there now, I said. In our bed, in our room, looking at our lake. And for the first time in 3 years, I don't lie awake missing you. I just sleep. Is that wrong, to finally have peace? The rain didn't answer. The headstone didn't move. But I felt something. Not Margaret's voice, not her touch. Just a sense, a knowing. She'd wanted this. Wanted me to be okay. Wanted me to protect what we'd built. Wanted me to sleep peacefully in the house we'd made together. And I was doing that. I love you, I said. I miss you every day. But I'm going to be all right. You were right. I am stronger than I thought. I touched the headstone one more time. Happy Easter, Margaret. I walked back to my truck, drove out of the cemetery, onto the lakeside road. Light rain on the windshield, wipers moving slowly. No rush, no urgency. I thought about Brandon in his rented room, about Roxanne in her apartment, about Eleanor in her office, about Hazel next door, about Gordon and Irene returning to their own lives. Everyone scattered, everyone finding their own path forward, and me, driving home, to the house I'd built, the promise I'd kept. No rush, no worry. Just me, the lakeside road, and the feeling after a very long time that everything was finally in its right place. Not perfect, not whole. Margaret was still gone. Brandon was still broken. Years of trust were still shattered, but in its right place. The rain, the road, the lake appearing through the trees, my driveway, my house, my home. I pulled in, turned off the engine, sat in the quiet truck listening to rain on the roof, everything in its right place. I got out, walked to the front door, unlocked it with the key I'd carried for 26 years, went inside, home. I went inside that evening and unpacked the last box, put away the last book, made the house fully mine again. 3 weeks later, I sat on the same porch drinking coffee with Hazel, and for the first time in months, I didn't notice the silence. May morning, sun on the lake. Birds in the trees Margaret had planted years ago. Coffee steam rising in cool air. Hazel sat in the chair beside mine, the chair Margaret used to sit in. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Hazel asked, "What will you do with the house now?" I looked out over the water. Same view I'd watched for 26 years. Live in it, I said. That's all it was ever meant for. Just live in it. Margaret had an idea once. Wanted to turn the old boathouse into a little studio for painting. She never got to do it. Maybe I'll do it for her. Give me a project, something to build. Hazel smiled. She'd like that. We sat quietly for another moment. Then Hazel said, "Margaret's last words to me, you know what they were?" I looked at her. "We were sitting right here, week before she died. You'd gone to the pharmacy to pick up her prescriptions. She took my hand and said, 'He's going to be okay. He just needs to remember the house was never about the house.'" I felt something tighten in my chest. She knew even then. She knew you, Hazel said. Knew what you'd fight for. And why. How do you measure what matters? By square footage, dollar signs, or by the width of a chair built for two? Hazel left an hour later. I went inside, stood in the study looking out at the lake. People ask me, "Are you angry?" Honest answer, I was angry for about a week. Then just sad. Then tired. Then somehow okay. Not happy, not triumphant. Just okay. I'm starting that boathouse studio next month. Hazel's son is helping me with the framing. It'll be small, just enough space for an easel and some supplies. Margaret never painted much, but she'd wanted to learn. Now she'll have a place, even if she's not here to use it. Brandon's text is still on my phone. I haven't replied. Haven't deleted it either. It just sits there, unanswered. Like so many questions I don't have answers for yet. Last week I ran into an old colleague from the bridge department. He asked about Brandon. "How's your son doing?" I could have told him everything. The forgery, the conspiracy, the disinheritance, the criminal charges. Instead, I just said, he's figuring things out, because he is. In his own way. In his rented room with his part-time job and his plea deal and his divorce papers. He wanted to sell the house to pay his debts. 3 months later, he's paying those debts by working. And the house still stands. Ironic, isn't it? The thing he tried to take is still here. The easy money he wanted is gone. And he's finally learning what I tried to teach him 20 years ago. That you have to stand on your own 2 feet. I just wish it hadn't cost us both so much. This morning I sat in the wooden chair on the porch. Same chair I built in 1998. The summer I built the house. I was 45 years old then. Margaret was 42. She'd stand behind me while I worked, handing me tools, making jokes about my obsessive measuring. The house took 6 months. The chair took 3 days. I'd carved each piece by hand, shaped the armrests, sanded them smooth. When I finished, Margaret sat in it, laughed. "You made the armrests too wide," she said. "They need to be wide enough for 2 people to sit in one chair," I told her. She'd looked at me, smiled. "You're ridiculous. I'm prepared." We never did sit in it together. Not the way I'd imagined. But sometimes she'd sit beside me, her hand resting on the armrest, while mine rested on hers. Close enough. Now I sit here alone. Morning coffee, lake view, birds singing. I rest my hand on the wooden armrest. Old wood weathered smooth under my palm, 26 winters, 26 summers, each one leaving the grain a little softer. I carved this too wide on purpose. Built it for a moment that never quite came. But that doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it hopeful. Margaret is gone. Brandon is gone. The life I thought I'd have, the family dinners, the grandchildren on this porch. The son who'd inherit this house and love it the way I loved it, that's gone too. But the house remains. The promise remains. The love that built it remains. I look out at the lake. Same water, same sky. Same view Margaret and I shared every morning for 25 years. She's not sitting beside me. Her hand isn't on the armrest. Her coffee cup isn't steaming in the morning air. But she's here, in the bricks I laid, in the windows I installed, in the chair I carved too wide because I wanted to be prepared for a moment of closeness that maybe we never needed because we were already that close. People ask if I'm lonely. I look at this chair, at these armrests, at this house, at this lake, and I think, how can I be lonely when everything I see reminds me I was loved? I built this chair the same summer I built the house. I was 45. Margaret laughed because I made the armrests too wide. I told her they needed to be wide enough for 2 people to sit in one chair. She's gone now, 3 years gone, but I still sit in this chair every morning. Still rest my hand on the armrest I carved for her, and they are still wide enough for 2. They always will be. And to you listening to my story, remember this betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it wears the face of someone you raised with your own hands. Looking back, I realize my mistake wasn't in trusting my son. It was in ignoring the signs when greed started replacing gratitude. I should have confronted him earlier, should have demanded accountability before things spiraled. Don't make my mistake. Don't wait until you're pushed out of your own home before you stand up for what's rightfully yours. This isn't just another dad's revenge story. This is about family justice, the kind that comes when you protect what you've built instead of letting others tear it down. I learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. And sometimes family justice means drawing a line even with the people you love most. I believe God put me through this test to show others that standing up for yourself isn't vindictive, it's necessary. These dad's revenge stories we hear aren't about bitterness. They're about reclaiming dignity when family justice has been denied for too long. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in my position? If you know someone who needs to hear this, please share it with them. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to Wise Revenge. We share stories about standing up when family justice matters most. Thank you for staying until the very end. I truly appreciate you being here. As a final note, some elements of this story have been fictionalized for clarity and impact. What remains true is the message: never let anyone take what you've rightfully earned.